Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies today from the Luzerne County Green Party, here representing the Green Parties of Northeastern Pennsylvania, who pretty much have sponsored this event, presenting Jill Stein tonight. So Gabriella is from Luzerne, and she will be our Master of Ceremonies. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome. Like Uncle Carl said, my name's Gabriella Romanelli, and I'm a member of the local Luzerne County Green Party. And it actually wasn't that long ago that I was just a freshman here at Wilkes. And I remember my freshman year voting for Jill Stein in the first election that I was old enough to vote in, which was the 2012 presidential election. And I was a registered Democrat at that time, but I voted for Jill anyway because she was the candidate that I liked best. And I thought that's what you were supposed to do, vote for the candidate that you like the best. So it wasn't until I was 20 years old that I actually registered green, and that was during my spring semester of my junior year. And during that semester, I was taking two courses that I think sort of influenced my decision, and I just want to mention them really quick. It was Women's Studies and Dr. Zarpentine's political philosophy class called Justice and International Affairs. And I was an English major, and as an English major, I was used to taking classes that exposed me to a heightened sense of empathy. But one thing that I wasn't used to, and that seemed to be happening during these classes, was I was being enlightened to the point that I was angered. And I would come home from school after my night classes, and I would be angry, and I would talk to my Uncle Carl, who you just heard from, and you'll hear from later. And one thing that I learned from him was that I didn't have to just be angry. He also taught me that you can't be content if you want change, but I also learned that there's a Green Party, and there's other people that care, and there's other people that want peaceful change. So that's why I joined the Green Party. And since joining, I was able to see my uncle speak and other Greens speak politically about things that I felt actually mattered. So last spring, that was actually my graduating semester, my senior semester, I was able to assist in the Green Party Presidential Caucus for Luzerne County, which was held across the hall at Kirby Hall, the home of the English department, which was like a second home to me. So that was really cool. And the only reason that I'm mentioning all this is because I realized how important my education has been to me and my identity as a member of the Green Party. And that's why it just means so much to me to be here welcoming Jill Stein to my campus and to my city. So thank you, Jill, for being here, and thank you, Wilkes, for having us. Thank you. You might notice that I'm the youngest person that you'll see at this podium tonight, but I'm substitute teaching right now, and I get to hear voices younger than mine on a daily basis, and I just want to share with you really quickly a conversation that I heard just last week, 10th and 11th graders, and they were having a conversation about this year's election. And it started out sarcastically, and they were being goofy, and they were mocking Donald Trump, and they were making Donald Trump jokes. And then it turned into a debate of Hillary versus Trump. And what I noticed about the way that these children were debating was that they weren't debating these candidates in terms of who they thought would be the better president, but who they thought would be worse. And so I sat back and I listened. I didn't interrupt them. I wanted to hear what they were saying. And I was ecstatic when a young woman said, "Well, what about Jill Stein?" Still, I didn't interrupt, even though I really wanted to. And I just wanted to see if anybody would answer or if anybody would know what to say. And a student did answer. He said, "I know about Jill Stein, but she's not Republican or Democrat, so can she even win?" And that's when I realized that, like many of you probably here today, these students don't want to choose between the lesser of two evils, and they shouldn't have to. So yes, they're not old enough to vote, and maybe they were just repeating what they've heard from other adults, but it's these adults and the decisions we make and our open-mindedness that affects what they know, what kind of planet they inherit, and what kind of society they inherit. And so that's why it's so important that you guys are all here today and that you took the time to listen and to learn and to start making the right choices right now, because like Jill's campaign repeats, it is in our hands. So thank you all for being here, and let's get started. We'll welcome our first speaker, who is Jay Sweeney. So John Sweeney is the former chairperson of the Green Party of Pennsylvania, and he's serving his second term as an auditor in Falls Township, Wyoming County, where he owns and operates a small wood finishing and painting business. John is running for state representative in the 117th Legislative District, and he's also a candidate for Pennsylvania Auditor General. Please welcome Jay Sweeney.
Thank you all. It's an honor to be here tonight with all of you, and it's a special honor to be here tonight with Jill Stein. Dr. Jill Stein, thank you for coming to Wilkes University, and thank you Wilkes University and PCN. We appreciate the opportunity. First of all, I support Jill and I support her Green New Deal. I am running for state representative in the 117th District, and it includes all of Wyoming County, the back mountain area of Luzerne County, and northwest sections of Lackawanna County. So if any of you live in those regions that you want to see me at some point, I have cards. I would hand you a card and ask you consider a vote for me. Regarding the Green New Deal, if I am elected to represent the 117th District, I will work to transition from the 19th century fossil fuels to a 21st century energy policy based on solar, wind, geothermal, and hydropower. These are the real bridges to our energy future. If elected to represent the 117th District, I will work on passing legislation that has been introduced by Healthcare for All PA. This legislation would, through a payroll tax and an employer tax, cover all Pennsylvanians with health care. No more premiums, no more co-pays, no more out-of-pocket expense. I believe that a healthy democracy can yield a healthy community. To that end, I support independent redistricting of Pennsylvania. The people should pick their legislators. Legislators should not pick their voters. Also, a healthy democracy is a fair ballot access for all candidates, paper ballots, contested elections. We have so many uncontested elections in Pennsylvania. All elections should be contested. Democracy demands a choice. We should also have an informed electorate. So I would work towards all those goals if elected to represent the 117th District. Another thing that I would work to is end the American Legislative Exchange Council. This is a public-private entity that meets with our legislators. It's a private group of individuals that meets with our legislators, and behind closed doors, they propose and vote on legislation, which is then taken to our state houses, to our Congress, and put forward before our legislators to vote upon. This is circumventing democracy, and I think it should be ended. And I would like to say that my representative and my state senator are both members of ALEC, and I think they should quit. I would also like to say that I support the efforts of groups like the Gas Drilling Awareness Coalition. I stand with GDAC in their efforts to expose the dangers of gas drilling, pipelines, infrastructure, and their efforts to promote solar energy. I stand with GDAC.
Thank you.
Thank you, GDAC. I stand with Citizens for a Healthy Jessup in their struggle against a gas-fired power plant in their community. I stand with Friends of Lackawanna in their effort to stop the 50-year expansion of the Keystone Sanitary Landfill in their community. I stand with the Air Coalition of Tunkhannock in their effort to fight for clean air in Wyoming County. And I stand with my friends and neighbors in Susquehanna County who are in a fight right now to stop a hazardous waste incinerator in their community. Thank you. And finally, I stand with Jill Stein for president.
Thank you, Jay. So our next speaker is Yane Indigo, and Yane is a surrogate of the Stein Baraka campaign, a writer, singer, and freedom fighter who is working with a collective of activists around the globe to build Ubuntu Nation, an international community coordinating efforts to assure that basic living rights, peace, equity, and freedom are enjoyed across the earth. She is the mother of a 19-year-old young woman who is also a singer and writer. And after an authentic appearance on CNN during which she discussed her stance in the 2016 election race, Yane was cast into the international spotlight. Her insights and inspirations became quickly and persistently sought by groups large and small, local and international, and she responds affirmatively to such requests as much as possible. Eager to connect with as many as she can and nurture the progressive movement. As her veracity is more deeply revealed, her appeal has only increased. She is eager to use this new level of visibility to further her goals, to promote global transformation, and usher in the better world she believes we are all eager for. Please welcome Yane Indigo.
How you guys doing? How are you? I would like to ask for you to repeat after me. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Does anyone know who said that? Does anyone know who we're quoting? Who is it? Nope. But I appreciate you. I appreciate your effort in answering. It's a woman named Assata Shakur. Do you know who Assata Shakur is? Have any of you heard of her? Assata Shakur is a member who was a former member of the Black Panther Party. It's a party. The Black Panther Party is a party that fought for freedom, fought for justice, fought for equity and equality for Black people, and was and continues at sometimes to be treated as a terrorist organization. Very, very similar to how people currently sometimes try to frame the Black Lives Matter movement, a movement that is working also to create equity and equality for all people by recognizing that there is a very particular population that is being significantly and has been historically oppressed. And I mention all of this for a couple of reasons. I mention it first of all because all of our struggles are interconnected, and because we have to all stand together and for each other. But I also mention it because the movements for social justice, like the movement of Black Lives Matter, like the movement for Black Lives, like Native Lives Matter, like the movements of Black, brown, and white people across the globe that are working to ensure that fairness, equality, equity, justice is everywhere, are the movements that are being supported by the Green Party, and those are the movements that are supported by Jill Stein. It's important because if we don't fight all the way to and nail with everything we've got, nothing is going to change. There is a powerful force that is pushing the injustices that are being experienced across this globe. And it is powerful, but we are more powerful, but we are not powerful if we ever give up. We're not powerful if we stop fighting. We're not powerful. When people put their hands in the air and they raise their fists like this, they raise their fist because a fist is powerful. A fist is powerful because those fingers are brought together. It is the unity that creates that power. That unity is what has to happen if we are going to make transformation real. And it has to be made real. There's a video that's going around right now that somebody told me, I recently ran into somebody, he told me he taped a video of me speaking during what was called a Weekend of Rage in Philadelphia. This was recorded in July. This was recorded in mid-July, right after I witnessed and was traumatized by the useless, senseless murders of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. And this video is going around right now because of Terrence Crutcher. Because it's not stopping. Because every time we turn around, another injustice is being piled on top of the last injustice. And it has to stop. We cannot keep going along with the status quo. We are not going to get the police brutality to end by electing the person who perpetuated the narrative that is in the minds of those officers when they see a black man on the street. When they see a black man on the street and in their mind they're looking at a super predator. When they're looking at a super predator, then they get afraid because they think that this man is not only someone who's going to hurt them, but that he has superpowers to do it, that he has nothing in his heart. She said our black boys have nothing in their heart. They have no empathy. That is what Hillary Clinton said about our young black boys who are dealing with the poverty and the tearing apart of our communities and trying as hard as they can to respond to it. And that's how that is how she framed our kids. And that is why, not the only reason, but that contributes to people looking at us and seeing danger immediately. Immediately. That man that was murdered on Friday, he was so far away. His hands were up. There was no danger. The only thing that made him seem dangerous was his blackness. And the thing that reinforced that all the way back when that crime bill was introduced was these ideas that were reinforced by the current Democratic presidential nominee. And if we go out here and we vote for her, we're voting to continue and perpetuate that. We're voting to forget about what happened to Berta Cáceres and all of the activists. We're activists around here, right? We worked hard to make a difference. If you go into Honduras and you try to do the same work, you're putting your life on the line in a whole nother way. And the reason that is the case, the reason that those activists who are fighting for climate justice, who are fighting for LGBTQ rights, that are fighting for women's rights, the reasons that those people are getting murdered is because the democratic process was undermined, and the undermining of that process was supported by the woman who was running as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. We cannot continue to stand for that kind of injustice, not here and not in any other part of this world. We need to be standing up. We need to be standing up for every other person on this planet. Somebody asked me if I was willing to fight for my freedom, and I said, and they asked me if I was willing to die for my freedom. And I'm not really out to die for my freedom, but I'm willing to die for your freedom. I won't experience my freedom if I die. I won't fight, but I will die for your freedom. If my life would bring about your freedom, then it is worth it. It is worth it to let it go. We have to fight for each other. We have to be motivated, and we cannot be narrowed and directed by fear. We have to be moving with hope. We have to be moving with hope. I was stomping for Bernie Sanders. Anybody here was supporting Bernie Sanders? I was stumping for Bernie Sanders, and I went on a show on CNN with a panel of voters in April, and they asked me, "Are you really Bernie or bust?" And I said, yeah, I'll never vote for Hillary Clinton. And I can't vote for Hillary Clinton, and because I care about Berta Cáceres' daughter, who was murdered after speaking up against Hillary Clinton and what Hillary Clinton did in Honduras and how she impacted Honduras and that ongoing coup that people are experiencing up to this moment right now. I said I would never vote for Hillary Clinton. They said, well, what would you do? You're gonna stay out of the election? Of course I'm not gonna stay out of the election. I'm a black woman. The people in my history, those people were beaten and killed in order to ensure that I had a right to vote. I'm never gonna miss an election. I'm never gonna not vote. They said, well, what will you do? I said, well, I will probably vote for Jill Stein. I'm learning about her right now. And I continued to learn about Dr. Stein. And then I met her during that time when I was in California. I met her while I was working hard for Bernie's candidacy in California. Dr. Jill Stein and I met, and I continued to get to know her and continue to read about her policies and continue to learn why she's such an outstanding candidate. And as there's the stuff you read, right? There's the stuff that you see on videos, but then there's my own experience in interacting with her and my own experience in working with her. And what I experienced is her willingness to put her campaign on the line, to stand firm with the movements that matter and the people who are doing the work in those movements. So, you may have seen, I'm sure many of you saw the video with Dr. Stein spray painting that equipment, right? And I was having an argument with a friend of mine who I met in California during the primary campaign process, who was, she's like, I like Jill Stein, but I don't agree with, why would she be damaging property? I mean, that's not okay. That's a statement, because that property cannot be more valuable than the people. It cannot be more valuable than the lives, or the lives that were buried, that those things were digging up, those machinery was digging up. Forget about that property. We can't worry about that property. We can demolish that property. That property doesn't matter. It is the living creatures of our planet that matter. And that is what that statement was. And it didn't matter if there are people who are going to say, well, now I'm not voting for Jill Stein because she destroys property. Because in that moment, she made a choice. She made a choice to stand with the people that are fighting for our lives. Regardless of what it is that somebody else might have thought about it, she made that choice. She made that choice in LA. When we went to the Black Lives Matter, their Black Lives Matter in LA had an encampment outside of City Hall because the police department there has one of the highest murder rates of black people in the country, LA. And they want the police commissioner who is overseeing that to be terminated. So they were camping outside of City Hall. The mayor refused to meet with them as a group. Remember that memo that went around, how to handle Black Lives Matter? Some people think, well, what's wrong with that? But what it did is it took away from the process, like the human-to-human aspect of it. So for example, in LA, when Black Lives Matter wanted to meet with the mayor, they offered, well, we'll meet with 3 or 4 of you, right? That's what the memo says. Because they want to determine how this movement is able to function and be effective. That's not how Black Lives Matter works. There is no 3 or 4 people who run and rule and make decisions. It's an actual democratic community. So you have to meet with the community. There's not 3 or 4 people who care about the deaths of these young people that's piling up every day. 3 teenagers were murdered that month that I was down there in LA. It's not, you can't just decide that 3 people get to make decisions, that 3 people get to represent everybody. Every person has a heart. Every person has a mind. They have their own ears and their own eyes, and they want to hear what you're saying. All of them. And you can't take it. You can't stand there and talk to that group. So I let Dr. Stein know that this organization was there and that they were doing that. And first day she was there, she goes right over to LA City Hall. After checking with them to make sure that they were fine with her coming, out of respect for their process, out of respect for their protocols, allowing that if they are the ones that are in the midst, in the forefront of this movement, that they have the authority to determine that process, right? So if they didn't want her there, she wasn't going to go, but they welcomed her, and she came, and she talked to the woman that was there every day since her son had been murdered, having received no information up to that moment about what happened in the murder of her son by a police officer. She talked to her, she listened, she talked to the other people that were there. Then she walked with that whole group, marched them right up in there to the mayor's office. Now the mayor had cut out. He went hiding, like he literally ran out while we were there. He knew that we were coming, he had seen, so he ran out, as he had been doing. He'd been running from Black Lives Matter. He ran also from Dr. Jill Stein. But she stood with them, in spite of the fact that some people would say that that was not appropriate for her to do, or that some people might still want to claim that Black Lives Matter, which is a love movement, is actually a hate group, even though people would have all kinds, or could have all kinds of critical feedback. She did not care. She chose the people and the movement first. That is what I need. That's what I need in a presidential candidate. That's what I need from my president, because our lives are on the line right now. Our lives are on the line. There are a lot of people who don't seem to get it. They are changing their perspective of who these other candidates are. They're making decisions about one candidate based on the other candidate. All of this fear, all of this, I hate him, I'm gonna go with her. I hate her, I'm gonna go with him. And we have somebody we can love and who will love us back. But you're gonna go based on fear? We've gotta break that out of our people. We've gotta break it out of our neighbors. We've gotta break it out of our family and our friends. We have to create courage in our communities, because our lives do depend on what happens right now. The planet is at stake right now. There are people who are dying right now. So, it is our duty to fight for our lives. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
Up next is this guy I was talking about before, Carl Romanelli. Carl is the Pennsylvania coordinator for Stein and serves the Green Party from the local level to the international. He is a retired officer of the Luzerne County Family Court, and in 2016 he ran for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. He has played a leading role in reforming Pennsylvania's restrictive ballot qualification system, and he's also really awesome. And it is my sincere honor to introduce you to my uncle, Carl Romanelli.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Love you, Gabriella. Love all of you. And thank you for coming. Thank you, Dr. Stein. And thank you, Yane. But you know, there's so much truth in what we just heard. And I want to share a little bit of a story about Wilkes. It was Wilkes College back in the day. And the same kinds of issues. Wars for profit. We learned about the evils behind the Vietnam War in the 60s and the early 70s. And it was young people who led the charge to end that war. And it was a lot like today. There was a conflict back and forth with, well, we have to support the troops. I can't desert my country, and so on. And others saying, no, this is not serving our country well. This is dishonoring our country. This is prostituting the young people who are serving in our military. At the same time, we were in the midst of a civil rights struggle. And even as a young boy, it made no sense to me that this is 1965, 1966, and we are still arguing over whether or not race is a factor, whether or not people deserve equal rights, or they will continue to be denied based on skin color, when we were supposed to be so sophisticated, when we were supposed to be John F. Kennedy's New Frontier generation. We certainly did not live up to that, because many of these problems are only amplified since. You know, watching what was happening in the country, watching my own conflict between patriotism and rebellion, because I wanted to come to peace with these issues. I wanted to find the right path. And the more that I investigated, the more I learned. I learned right on this campus, sitting on a petrified stump over by the library by myself many a day. I mourned for my Uncle Lou, who was a doctor killed in Vietnam just 2 days before he was supposed to come home. A person who served there and who ended up paying the ultimate price, not because of who he killed, but because of who he saved. He was a guy that would go into the village and he would make sure that the children got any of the sweets he got in his packages from home, that the old people got to try the pizzagana and other ethnic foods that would be sent to him from our family. And he made sure that people were inoculated and that babies were delivered healthily. He died amid 23 Vietnamese people because of a U.S. offensive that went through. He snuck out of camp. He wasn't supposed to be with the people. These weren't Viet Cong. These weren't armed people. These were civilians. And when the horrors of that war were revealed, and the corruption of the Watergate system was revealed, and the corruption that we learned of the wars for profit from the Vietnam War, our government and our people promised us never again. And what have we gotten? All we've gotten is ever since. We run an entire industry based on war, based on killing. We vilify with narrow-minded, Stone Age kinds of prejudice, acting like a religion or an ethnicity is the reason people don't like us. I think of so many nights sitting and having coffee and having these discussions with my nieces. And I wonder, how peaceful of a man would I be if I was sitting there and all of a sudden somebody knocked on the door and evicted me and leveled my house? Or if a drone looking for him fell in my kitchen and killed the ones I love? And you multiply that by hundreds of thousands. This is what is going on. When we want to have health care for people in America, we say we can't afford it, but we could afford to kill people all over the world. When we say that we want to provide free college education for people in the United States, we say we can't afford that. What are you, crazy? Yet we continue to provide subsidies and allow major corporations to pay zero taxes to contribute to this. So I ask, whose fault is this? We have to take responsibility for our share. We let this happen. This is our country. As powerful, as sinister, and as connected as the forces of evil are, it is a system, A system that can't run without each and every one of its moving parts. Those moving parts are you. If you stop working for the death machine and start applying your mechanics to a love machine, we could change the world. We are working toward a future, but we don't have to wait. It doesn't have to be next year. It doesn't have to be in 10 years. It could be at hand. It could be now, and it's up to you. Do you want your vote to belong to babble corporate nonsense that just pits us against each other? Or is it time that the American people stop blaming one another for what's wrong, realize the potential that we have to solve every problem? Every problem is solvable. And let's not blame each other. Let's talk to each other. Let's lift each other up. Let's be judicious about where we spend our money, how we cast our votes, where we are going to work, or what we are going to do with our labor. That's how we've brought about social change. I don't have a lot of faith as I stand here in people my age, but you, the young people of this country, have done something very special this year. You know, forget Bernie Sanders. I appreciate, Bernie, the message you brought, but the magic is not Bernie. The magic is you. The movement happened because of you. Bernie was looking for a chairmanship. You were looking for justice. You were looking for a better country. And I say to you, you will have that better country if you dare to demand it, if you dare to dream it, if you dare to step out and take it. It's here. And to show us the policy that will get us here. I want this room to start right now. Go green, Jill Stein. 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 Okay, hold it. Did I wake you up? All right, let's try another one. Jill, not Hill. 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 Ladies and gentlemen, proud to present our candidate, the one and only Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you, Yane, and thank you, Jay. And above all, thanks to all of you. It is so exciting to see you here. And a big thank you, of course, to Wilkes University for hosting us, for actually empowering your student body to lead the way forward, to be fully informed, and to make a really empowered and judicious choice in this election. And thanks to all of you for daring to stand up and refusing to be silenced, and refusing to have our future taken away from us. Thank you for standing up and saying that we do have the power, we do have the solutions, we do reflect the values of the American people, and if they are informed, we really do have the power to transform our future in this very election in real time. Thank you for the courage to lead us forward. Thank you, Wilkes University. When I was at the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, it's really what the future looks like, particularly the courage and the unity of the indigenous nations who are coming together like never before in history, overcoming traditional divisions, overcoming traditional rivalries and blood feuds, coming together to say that we are one people on one planet and we will not allow it to be taken away from us. And when I was handed that can of spray paint, I had not intended to be a part of civil disobedience. I was going there really to support the indigenous nations and the Standing Rock Sioux, because they are standing up not just for their water supply, not just for their human rights, not just for their climate, but for what really belongs to all of us. And to see them putting their bodies on the line after their sacred sites had been desecrated by that bulldozer, which we sometimes call construction equipment, this had become a piece of destruction equipment. So when I was handed that can of spray paint, first actually, I had been asked would I lock down with them on the construction equipment. And a lockdown is not something you want to do without really having thought about it. It's a very dangerous thing to do. You can get tased and beat up and pepper sprayed and all that while you've got two hands locked down. So, I said, no, thank you, I'm not going to do that. And then they came back to me, some of the indigenous leaders there at the site of the protest, following this desecration of their burial sites, following their protests the next morning, because this had taken place in the dark of night on a weekend. This was a sneak attack by the Dakota Access Pipeline Company that had basically come out in the middle of the night to sort of make this a done deal so that they couldn't be stopped. They were trying to really preempt any resistance and mow down those burial lands. They did that in the dark of night, and when the protest came out the next morning, they brought out the attack dogs, and they brought out the pepper spray, and they were just viciously violating our basic right to protest, to stand up for redress of grievances. So the next morning, as I had arrived the night before, the word went out that there was going to be an action. So I went out to support that action. And sure enough, people were locked down on this destruction equipment. And when that can of spray paint was passed to me, and I saw how they were putting their lives on the line for our water supply, the water in the Missouri River that is relied on for drinking water by 17 million people, and relied on for agriculture of that whole Central American region in the center of our continent, I felt like there was just no way that I could say no to that. So I took that can of paint and I did what I thought was the most useful thing that I could do being there, which was to say, I support this message, that message that we will not allow these destructive pipelines to destroy our future. And when the police issued a warrant for my arrest, which didn't happen until I was already on the airplane, for whatever reason they delayed, my response to that is that they put out the arrest warrant for the wrong people. The real vandals here is the Dakota Access Pipeline. They are vandalizing our human rights, our climate, and our water supply. And they're also putting our democracy really in the target hairs. There were all kinds of drones, these little spy drones that were circling around the site. But what happened the very next day was that the state of North Dakota passed a bill. They became the first in the nation to actually legalize weaponized drones here in the United States, which is like astounding. What are they going to do? Fly pepper spray right into our faces as we stand there, asserting our democratic rights? And they also went on to charge Amy Goodman for trespassing, for being a member of the press and doing her job. They should put out a warrant for the press who weren't there for not doing their job and covering these critical issues to our future. So this is really what the future looks like, the threats to our planet, to our water, and to our human rights. But it's also what the future looks like, to be standing up with courage and standing together and standing like on a rock, to stand for the future that we deserve and the rights we deserve. So that pipeline that pipeline that we are working to stop. And I encourage everyone to go there if you can. It's a really transformative, incredible, wonderful experience to be there at Standing Rock, or to send contributions or send support. And let me say that we were actually vindicated, because what happened 2 days later was that President Obama basically agreed and called for a halt in the construction, and said that that permit needed to be reviewed, which is exactly what we were saying. That permit that gave the okay to the Dakota Access Pipeline Company, that permit was supposed to rely on the informed consent of the indigenous people. They had not been informed, and they did not consent. It was an illegitimate permit. So the president himself came around after the publicity of our protest. He came around and said, you know, that's right. We should stop that pipeline. And then there was a decision in court just this past week that also agreed. The president had basically issued a voluntary recommendation, but then the courts came out and said, no, this permit must be reviewed, that pipeline will not go forward. That's the kind of courage that we need all across this nation and all across this planet. And thank you to the people of Pennsylvania who have stood up to fight and to stop, in fact, the Constitution pipeline, and to fight and to stop the New England Direct pipeline as well, which was also coming to my home state as well. So when we stand up, we find we actually do have power, the power that they don't want us to know about. We also stopped the Keystone XL pipeline, as a matter of fact, and kudos to all of you who've done that. And I want to also echo what Jay said before about giving a big thank you to the Gas Drilling Awareness Coalition for helping to lead the charge on stopping these pipelines. But it's not just about stopping things, it's also about starting things. And this is the really exciting thing, is that there is a way forward that creates an America and a world that works for all of us. A way forward that puts people, planet, and peace over profit, instead of the other way around. They've got it backwards in this predatory economy that we are locked in right now. We're calling for a different way forward. And I want to, maybe the main thing I want to share tonight is that, in fact, we do have the power, and you have the power. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. Well, we have it, we're going to use it, and we're going to make history with it in this election. So one of the ways we have that power is because, in fact, there are 43 million young people who are locked into predatory student loan debt right now. Anybody know anyone who's locked into student loan debt? A few people in this room. Well, how about this? It wasn't so long ago that the Democrats and Republicans in Congress decided that they were going to bail out the crooks on Wall Street. The crooks who crashed the economy with their waste, fraud, and abuse. They bailed them out to the tune of $16 trillion, as a matter of fact. No questions asked, basically, enabled them to continue the waste, fraud, and abuse, the continue gambling with taxpayer dollars. The banks are not under control. They are bigger than ever and more ready to fail. But nonetheless, Congress went ahead and bailed them out, really no questions asked. Well, if they could bail out the crooks who crashed the economy, it's time to bail out the students who are the victims of that crashed economy. It was $16 trillion to bail out Wall Street, but to bail out students, it's tiny compared to that. It's $1.3 trillion. There are so many ways that we can come up with that money. Like, for example, how about we tax Wall Street, the most profitable sector of the economy that is not paying a sales tax? Why should they be the only ones not to contribute? All the rest of us are, by putting a tiny sales tax on Wall Street transactions. We have all the money we need, basically hundreds of billions of dollars every year, that could begin to bail out that student debt and could do so very quickly. And there are other ways that we'll come to as well. But the point is, there is no better investment in our society and in our future than liberating the generation of young people who must lead us forward. It's not just for your sake, it's for all of our sake. Because think about it. You already have, or you're in the process of getting, your degrees, you have your training, you have the skills, you have the passion, you have the love. We need to turn you loose to do your magic and reinvent the economy for the 21st century. That's what it always takes. And in doing so, you not only lead the way forward on the economy, you also lead the way forward on all of the social movements and the social causes that we are fighting right now. Who is it that's leading the charge to ensure that Black Lives Matter, that we end police violence and mass incarceration? Who is it that's leading the charge for a welcoming path to citizenship for the immigrants who've always been at the backbone of our economies and our culture? We are all immigrants in this country, with the exception of the Native Americans, from whom we stole the land, and the African Americans, who didn't have a choice. And who is it that's leading the charge for LGBTQ rights? That is by young people. And who is leading the charge for climate justice and to stop the pipelines? It's always young people. So we have to turn you loose to do what it is that we must have if we are going to have a just and sustainable society. That's why this issue for our campaign is number one. This is the gateway issue, because we have to unleash the ground troops for social change. That's you. That's what you've always done, and that's what we need to enable you to do. So that's why we put this front and center, but that's also why we say we have the power to turn this around in this election, because 43 million young people, and not so young people now, because you don't get out of student debt, you just get into it. It really cannot be paid down in this economy that we have. So 43 million, turns out that is a winning plurality in a three-way presidential vote. So you actually have the power to get the word out and take over this election. So I don't know, how many people knew that? How many knew that there were enough student debtors right now that if you got the word out that you could come out to vote to cancel student debt, you would actually have the power to be able to do that? Were you aware of that? I just have to ask. A few, but not many. So let me just say, don't keep it a secret. You can let that word out that we could actually put an end to student loan debt, and we could do that in 6 weeks from now. And we could do that not only to cancel student debt, but to make public higher education free and to make private higher education affordable with reasonable and limited loans that can actually be repaid at a reasonable rate for a limited period of time, and then it's over and done with. We could structure those loans in such a way that that debt is actually repayable. And in coming out to take over this election, you know, this is the generation that has been the victim of a predatory economy, not just in terms of the debt, but also in terms of the jobs. Wall Street crashed the economy, which, by the way, you know about the guilt trip. They always say, well, you took out those loans, right? You got to pay it. Well, actually, Wall Street tore up the contract when they crashed the economy, because you were told, you do the work, you get the degree, you will have a job at the other end. But somehow those jobs have not come back. The jobs that came back after the Wall Street crash are the low wage, the part-time, the temporary, and the insecure jobs. So we need the good jobs. So we say, forget that guilt trip. Wall Street deserves that guilt trip. not the younger generation. What kind of society has ever survived by devouring its young? That is what's happening right now economically. The younger generation is really being thrown under the bus on debt, on jobs, on the climate crisis that you've inherited. So, we say there's no guilt trip here whatsoever. It's our job as the adult generation to ensure that young people have the skills they need to survive in this economy. In the 20th century, those skills were a high school degree. So we paid for it. It was a right. You had a right to the education you needed to survive in the 20th century. So by analogy, you have a right to the education you need to survive in the 21st century. That means a college education. No apologies for funding and making it affordable. We also know, by the way, from the GI Bill, after the Second World War, we paid for college for all the returning soldiers. And what we found was for every $1 we put into higher education, we get back $7 in return into public coffers in revenues and also in public benefits. So there's no excuse not to fund higher education, to make it free for public higher ed, which, by the way, will help bring down the price of private higher education, but to ensure that the loans are there in an affordable way that can be paid back in reasonable time for private higher education as well. That is a human right. We also call for health care as a human right and for joining the community of nations that provides it. Right now, it doesn't cost us any more than what we are already paying. Right now, we're paying for it through 1,000 different ways, through our local taxes, our state and our federal taxes, through our payroll taxes, and through private and out-of-pocket, and you're paying for it if you are a business owner. We pay for it really, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. So instead, what we say is let's put all of our healthcare dollars into actual healthcare, not into paper pushing, bureaucracy, red tape, and gigantic CEO salaries. If we put healthcare dollars into healthcare, we have all the healthcare we need and all the money to pay for it. Because it is unacceptable that tens of thousands of people die every year from not being able to afford health care. In fact, right now, even under Obamacare, 1 out of 3 Americans, even if they have health insurance, cannot afford health care because you can't pay the premiums or the co-pays or the deductibles. Again, it's death by 1,000 cuts. So we can do this right by moving to a single-payer system, as the Healthcare for All movement in Pennsylvania is calling for. So a big shout out and a salute and a thank you to Healthcare for All Pennsylvania for the bill that you are working to push forward. We deserve that now. Here's another thing we deserve. We deserve a job, a good job, a living wage job as a human right. And not only a good job, but a job that will end the climate crisis in a Green New Deal, like the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression. It's not like rocket science. It's not something we're inventing. We've actually done this before. We don't have to figure out how to do it. So we're calling for 20 million jobs. That's enough to put everyone back to work. Or if you're working a part-time, low-wage job, you've got a better one, a full-time job. Because we need a national mobilization right now in order to fix the climate crisis that is barreling down on us. We declare a climate emergency and an emergency jobs program to solve that climate emergency now. So we would create the jobs in clean renewable energy, in healthy and sustainable local food production, so we're eating food that's good for us and good for the planet and good for farmers and good for the climate. It's good all around. Enough of this processed, industrial, mechanized food, which has good things taken out of it and bad things put into it, and which is driving the climate crisis, and which actually threatens food security. When people say, well, why don't you love GMOs? You know, we can throw lots of pesticides onto them, which is basically what GMOs do. They are pesticide tolerant. Actually, to a pesticide which is now recognized as a likely cause of cancer in human beings. You know, this is what we're doing with all this great science, is creating an agriculture system that depends on high doses of toxic pesticide? You know, I don't think so. There are sustainable food systems out there. And in addition, by moving to the corporate agribusiness GMO food system, we take a plant system which has thousands of varieties, and we reduce them to 2 or 3 varieties of corn or soy or wheat or whatever they're creating GMOs for. It reduces the diversity of the plant kingdom. Nature has diversity for a reason, because the environment changes in unpredictable ways, whether it's rainfall or temperature or other conditions in the soil. We need lots of different kinds of seeds. That is nature's insurance policy. So when people say, well, why in the world are you not supporting GMOs? That is why I don't support GMOs. They are not good for the planet. They are not good for the people. And there are hundreds of millions of dollars being pumped into this promotional campaign right now, this PR campaign for the agribusiness companies. So, you know, don't drink that Kool-Aid. Stay tuned to the non-corporate sources of information out there, and know that we deserve a healthy and sustainable food system that will get rid of our food deserts in inner cities. That is a human rights shame, scandal, that we have food deserts in this day and age in the middle of our urban areas. We deserve to have a healthy food system. We also deserve a public transportation system which is affordable and renewably powered, and which dovetails with muscle-powered transportation. That is recreational transportation. We should be able to bike and walk safely to transit hubs on safe bike paths and safe sidewalks. That's how we get healthy as a society, by being able to use muscle power as part of how we get places. And it turns out that under this kind of a Green New Deal that gets rid of the pollution, that enables us to have recreational transportation as part of getting where we're going, that creates a healthy food system, we get so much healthier so quickly that we save so much money. Believe it or not, it actually pays the costs of the green energy transition. This is not some ginormous thing we could never afford, because you know what? We spend $3 trillion a year not on a healthcare system, but on a sick care system that allows corporate America to make us sick through this corporate energy system, this corporate food system, this corporate transportation system. By transitioning on an emergency basis to a Green New Deal, we revive the economy, we turn the tide on climate change, and we make the friggin' wars for oil obsolete, and it pays for itself in health benefits alone. So I'll just say one more thing quickly about the wars, because we're led to believe that there is no choice, that we have to fight ISIS the same way we fought Al-Qaeda, the same way we fought the Taliban. And how successful have we been exactly? You know, well, every terrorist enterprise that we have ever fought has at least as much territory. In fact, we've actually done them a great favor by recruiting global support for them around the world. And our drone program, which is actually an assassination program, really does the job for them, because for every intended target, 9 people are killed who are not the intended target. So what better way to mobilize and recruit people into the ranks of the very terrorist causes that we are trying to fight? So we say we need a new kind of offensive in the Middle East. It's called a peace offensive in the Middle East. And it starts with a weapons embargo. We are the main supplier of weapons to all sides in this conflict, and including to some of our allies like Saudi Arabia, who then want to support other terrorists that we sometimes call good terrorists. You know, this has been kind of our game plan for quite some time, where it's the warlord of the day or the terrorist of the day who's our ally, and then guess what? They're not our ally the next day, you know, because this is it's a predatory, foreign policy based on economic and military domination. We need a foreign policy based on international law and human rights and diplomacy, and to put an end to these catastrophic regime change wars for once and for all. Let me say briefly also about the crisis of immigration. Where does that come from? You know, probably the most powerful thing we can do to stop the crisis of immigration is to stop causing it in the first place through NAFTA, for example, that put millions of farmers out of business south of the border, forcing people to flee here, become refugees, economic refugees, or through the war on drugs. For example, 100,000 people killed in Mexico alone in the last 5 or 6 years from this war on drugs, which, by the way, we call for an end to the war on drugs. It's time to legalize. In fact, as you probably know, and I can say this as a medical doctor, marijuana is a dangerous substance because it's illegal. That is the major danger, is the violence associated with the underground drug economy, just like in the prohibition of alcohol. It became much safer the minute we legalized it. And by the way, if alcohol and tobacco are perfectly legal, and they are far more dangerous than cannabis, it's time to take cannabis off the list of scheduled substances. And as president, one of my first acts in office would be to do a really radical thing, and that is to instruct the Drug Enforcement Agency to actually use science in determining what substances should be listed. Because the minute they do, cannabis and hemp come off of that list. These are economic development tools that should be available to the community to use for economic development, not to be corporatized. We shouldn't be legalizing these substances simply to put them into the hands of big corporations to control them. These should be community-based resources for economic development at the grassroots level. That's where that should go. And again, on the immigration crisis, another way that we are causing this, aside from the war on drugs, which we will end, is by overturning other democracies. Because where are the major immigrants coming from into this country? It's from Honduras, from Guatemala, and from El Salvador. What do they have in common? These were 3 democracies that were basically overturned either by the CIA or with the thumbs up from Hillary Clinton in the case of Honduras, or by, shenanigans by the US government that overturned these democracies, creating generations of violence. For example, in Guatemala, where there have been generations of violence. This is a very catastrophic thing to do, to undermine democracies and to open the door to military and corporate rule. So It's time. We say to Donald Trump, we don't need your friggin' wall. We just have to stop invading other countries. Let's stop driving people to come here as refugees and then criminalizing them, for heaven's sake, once they get here. And while the immigrant community has learned that Donald Trump is and the Republicans actually, but particularly Donald Trump, are the hate mongers and the fear mongers, they've also learned that the Democrats are the party of deportation and detention and of night raids of women and children who are fleeing coups like in Honduras that Hillary Clinton and our government gave the thumbs up to. So we can do the right thing here and create a welcoming path to citizenship for the immigrants who have always been at the backbone of our communities. So we can do the right thing and fix that. And quickly, on the crisis of racism and violent policing, we need many solutions, but there are a few we can start with very quickly. Every community deserves to have a police control board so that communities are in control of their police, not have police be in charge of their communities. So that means a review board with the power to hire and fire the police chief, and also with the power of subpoena. And communities also deserve to have access full-time to an independent investigator who's not part of the police department, who's not part of the district attorney's office, but an independent investigator who can look into every case of death at the hands of police, so we can have accountability and we can get to an end of this crisis in our policing. We also call for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because slavery didn't just end, it transitioned into lynchings, which transitioned into Jim Crow, and then segregation, and then redlining of communities, and then the racist war on drugs, and then mass incarceration, which, by the way, we do have, in fact, the Clintons to thank for that war on that omnibus crime bill in the 1990s that Bill Clinton signed and Hillary supported, that opened the floodgates to mass incarceration, which has then given way to this crisis of police violence now. And we saw, these recent, just horrific, tragic cases just in the last couple of days. So it's not getting better, and this has been in the public eye now for years. So it really is time to stand up and to call a halt to this. And that includes, the review boards and the independent investigators. But it's also time for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so we can sit down and rehumanize our society. We are a garrison state right now, and we are armed and ready to shoot. And it is happening all over the place. It is time to put an end to this crisis of fear, violence, and racism. So we call for this Reconciliation Commission that will create a facilitated, community-based discussion to share our stories, to share our music, to share our art. So many people don't know the real story of racism, the continuing legacy of slavery. We need to sit down and share this in our schools, in our communities, in our workplaces, and get ourselves on the same page with our common human values, our common future, and our common destiny. We need to become that one human family that we must be if we are going to survive into the future that we deserve. So last thing I'll say, and then we can have time for, I think, a few questions, and then maybe a group selfie, if you would like to do that. The last thing I want to just really leave you with is that we do have the power. They want you to think that you are powerless, but in fact we are powerful. We actually have the numbers that it takes, those 43 million students in debt, another 27 million Latinos who have learned that the Republicans are the party of hate and fear and the Democrats are the party of deportation, they're looking for a place to go too. Here's the problem. The press, the corporate press, which dominates the media, doesn't like a true threat to business as usual. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are a continuation of business as usual, which continues to march to the right. It's not going to get better. This is not a can to be kicked down the road to 4 years from now, because then the candidates will be even more outrageous, more militarist, more corporatist, and more imperialist. This doesn't get better down the line. We have to stand up on this now while we still can. Donald and Hillary are not going to solve this for us, and in fact, Hillary is not the solution to Donald, and I'll tell you why. Donald Trump is a part of a movement, right? It's right-wing extremism. He wasn't the only Looney Tunes guy in the Republican lineup. It was all of them, and it's not just Republicans these days. It's Democrats as well. And even when they're really nice and charming people, what they do, unfortunately, hasn't been all that much different. And under Barack Obama, a Democrat in the White House, and a very likable and gracious person, but whose policies, in fact, in many ways, have gone further than George Bush in assaulting the climate, in massively expanding fossil fuel extraction, in deporting immigrants, the deporter-in-chief, deporting more people than all prior presidents combined in the 20th century, expanding the wars. It didn't stop with Bush. Barack Obama kept going. He created the surge into Afghanistan. We're now bombing 7 countries, and there is no end in sight. We're only digging ourselves in deeper here. This is not working. It is the war industry, in fact, through the power of the military-industrial complex, which means the power of their campaign contributions and their appointments and the revolving door and the lobbyists. They are setting national policy. They are the only ones who are benefiting from these catastrophic wars for oil. They are not making us safer. They are not improving democracy or stability or women's rights in the Middle East. The only beneficiary here is the war profiteers. They are the ones who are driving this. And these two parties are both a part of that, the Democrats as much as the Republicans. On climate, all of the above has been worse than drill baby drill because it blew the lid off of fossil fuel extraction and production. If you look at student debt, that has not gotten better, or mass incarceration, that's not getting better. It is a race to the bottom between the greater and the lesser evil. When they try to intimidate you, and there is a big fear campaign going on now. Anybody hearing it out there? Yeah, big time. But you know what? 4 out of 10 Americans are not voting in this election because they reject the 2 choices that have been throwing them under the bus for a long time. And in fact, the majority of American people have rejected these 2 choices. They were elected, in fact, by 9% of the electorate. According to the New York Times, it was 9% of the electorate that voted in the primaries and chose Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Most people didn't bother to vote because they didn't have the choices that they wanted to see. Now, Bernie got more support than any other candidate when he was actually able to be heard and when the corporate media was not colluding with the Democrats and the Democratic machine to suppress those voices. So Bernie really had more popular appeal than any other candidate because what we need is a truly radical progressive agenda. That is the solution that we need. So this right-wing extremism that Donald Trump represents is a product of the policies that were passed by Republicans and Democrats, both of them. Who is it that signed NAFTA, that gave us NAFTA? Bill Clinton, along with Hillary, cheering for NAFTA and our jobs that went overseas. That's what created this incredible economic hardship and the economic misery that opens the door to demagogues like Donald Trump and to right-wing extremism. Or it was Wall Street deregulation, again brought to us by Bill Clinton and cheered for by Hillary Clinton, who's been the advocate for Wall Street, you know, going back as far as the eye can see. So favoring Wall Street, favoring the big insurance companies, giving it away to the fossil fuel companies. Yeah, Donald supports coal, but Hillary supports fracking. Coal is a dying fuel anyhow. It's become obsolete. It will not survive. But there's a big future out there for fracking if our elected officials continue to push it. So what we're saying is that the conditions for Donald Trump have been created every bit as much by the Democrats as by the Republicans. The Clintons are not the solution to this. They were very much a part of what caused this economic misery that has led to right-wing extremism. So do not drink the Kool-Aid that tells you to cast a vote against your future, to cast a vote against your values. Democracy needs a moral compass. It needs vision and values. Right now, you're being told you have to vote against the guy you fear the most. Democracy is not a question of who do we fear the most and who do we hate the most. You know, that's a moral vacuum. Democracy needs a positive vision of how we move forward. And we could have a solution to this voting system in the blink of an eye through ranked choice voting. Do people know about it? Have you heard about it, ranked choice voting? So it says that you can rank your choices in just gambling and picking one and trying to figure out, are you going to vote your values or are you going to vote your fears? You can actually do both. You can vote your values as your number one candidate, knowing that if that candidate loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your number two. It gets rid of the whole problem of splitting the vote or spoiling the election or throwing away your vote. All these things that they try to say to scare you out of your vote. They could fix this in a heartbeat. And when I first ran for office in my home state in Massachusetts, we filed the bill that would have prevented any splitting of the election, but they would not allow that bill out of committee, even though the Democrats had 80% of the votes. They won't let it out because they rely on fear. They want to be able to intimidate you into voting for them. Why do they do that? Because at the end of the day, they are not your friend, and they know that they cannot earn your vote. They have to intimidate you into voting for them. On that basis alone, they do not deserve your vote. You deserve your vote. You deserve a vote that moves us forward together. If we win, we turn the White House into a greenhouse, and the world will be a better place for it. Whether we win the office or we win the day by promoting lower candidates, down ballot candidates, and there are hundreds of Greens who are running in this election, and we help bring visibility to them by standing up. We also send a message to the power structure that they cannot ignore us and they cannot ignore our issues by standing up and casting a vote for what we believe in. Hillary Clinton and the Democrats are not going to solve this for us. If we silence ourselves, we basically give it over to the corporate political parties who do not have our interests at heart. We are the ones we've been waiting for. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it in the first place. We have it. It's time to stand up and use it. It's time to reject the propaganda of the lesser evil, and to stand up and fight for the greater good, like our lives depend on it, because they do. We do have the power to create an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. The power to create that world is not just in our hopes It's not just in our dreams. Right here, right now, at Wilkes University, that power is in our hands. Let's stand up and make it so together. Thank you so much.
Yes, we have to be out of here by 9 o'clock. So, and we promised Wilkes, so we have a choice. We could either go into some Q&A right now, or our candidate and our team could come down, talk to you, get a couple of quick selfies, and... All right, well, quick Q&A. Okay.
Dr. Stein, first of all, as the chair of the Wilkes Political Society, thank you very much for coming here. We appreciate it. And guys, give her a round of applause. Wasn't she great?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I have a question. I am a council person in the borough of 44. I'm one of the youngest elected officials in the state.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I have 3,000 people that, I'm responsible to. One of the things that you brought up is having independent investigators come in for our police department. One of our biggest expenses is our police department. So my question is, how will you pay for those programs? Because
Yes.
I know a lot of people who don't want to have their taxes raised, and that's the biggest part of our budget. So how would you do that?
Great point. So let me say, I think local communities are getting squeezed all across the board. Now, I don't know how much you're paying for your police department, but I know in LA, for example, the police budget is half of the municipal budget, in the same way that the military is half of our national budget. Is this really the best use of our dollars? So let me say, I think some of those dollars should be spent on prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So in LA, for example, we are calling for after-school programs and youth programs and cultural programs and jobs that help prevent the violence in the first place. So that's one question, is maybe the funding can be better distributed. So it's not all, spent on over-militarized policing to start with. But also, I think communities are being starved, in part because federal expenses are going to the military. If we were to stop these catastrophic wars, which are not making us safer, they are bankrupting us. It is half of our income taxes, in fact, just about, which are being spent for the wars. We would have far more money to distribute, to ensure that that money is coming to the states, and from the states it is being distributed to the communities so that they have the resources they need, not only for independent investigators, but for high-quality school system, for affordable housing, for environmental protection, and to create the jobs that we need. Thank you.
A question over here.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to hear your opinion on if you believe that transitioning to truly sustainable energy will help to create a truly sustainable economy.
Great. There's more to being sustainable than just green energy. We need to be socially sustainable, racially sustainable, and that's why our Green New Deal actually calls for sustainability, not just ecological, but economic and social as well. So there are many components to this. What we have to do in a real hurry, though, is transition our energy supply really fast, because the science tells us we need to have 100% clean renewable energy by 2030 if we are going to get out of here alive. That's actually what the science tells us. So we need to expedite that, but in doing that, we create a lot of jobs, which creates a more just economy. That's going to, we have to do other things as well. We need a financial system that actually makes this possible to do. We need to break up the big banks. We need to create community banks and public banks that provide the financing that we need in order to do this. We call for public funding for these local jobs. again, in these three areas of energy, transportation, and sustainable food, as well as infrastructure. That includes ecosystems. You know, we've got to restore our water systems. We need healthy water and sewage systems again. Restoring our rivers, our wetlands, our forests, etc. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it actually needs to be done in a hurry. So that's the first step. I have no doubt, you know, that when people actually understand the terms of this crisis, that this is a crisis far worse than what we faced when Pearl Harbor was bombed. That was one harbor. We're now looking at the loss of all harbors, all population centers on the coast in this country and around the world. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, we mobilized. It took 6 months to transform the economy to a wartime footing. 25% of GDP was transformed in the course of 6 months. If we could do that in 6 months, in 15 years, we can transform our energy system to 100% renewable. We can do this. Thank you.
Dr. Stein?
Yes.
Back here.
Okay, great. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Stein.
Yes.
I'm Jill, too.
Okay.
My question is for you. Are you going to create any policy change for major corporate mergers like Monsanto and Bayer?
Great, really good question. So we will not be shy about using antitrust laws. So where the, you know, competition goes down, you know, down the chute when these big mergers happen. Look at what happens to our communications. You know, whether it's internet or whether it's media, which has been consolidated into a handful of big corporations. You know, suddenly you have one happy corporate message. You know, and that's all you hear. So, or health insurance, you know, you've got all the big insurance companies that are consolidated. You lose competition, you lose innovation, you lose efficiency when you get these big, gigantic corporate behemoths. So we will use antitrust laws in order to break them up so that we have an efficient, responsive, and creative economy that we deserve. Thank you. Okay. So, Carl, another one? Okay, over here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Anya. This is going to sound like a really trivial question probably for you, but there are a lot of rumors on social media and across various media platforms that are trying to discredit you as a viable candidate by attacking your viewpoint on vaccines and vaccinations. So I'd like for you to set the record straight on how you actually view vaccinations, like hearing it from you, so that I can completely discredit everything everyone else says, because it's really annoying, honestly.
So there are lots of trolls out there, especially on social media. Hillary is spending millions of dollars on trolls. And, you know, because they are afraid. They're very afraid that if people take us seriously, that, you know, they're going to lose it. You know, so they rely on fear. They have to smear my campaign and then, you know, just intimidate people into voting for them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a medical doctor, and I support vaccinations as a basic, infrastructure of our public health system. At the same time, we need to get back our regulatory agencies so that they are clearly serving us and not compromised by campaign contributions. And I've been a critic of the FDA going way back before vaccines were an issue, to where the FDA refused to recognize and refused to warn people about mercury levels in fish. That's where my bone to pick with the FDA began, seeing how powerful the fishing industry was by suppressing public education about the risks of mercury in our fish. We needed to be able to warn people. It took years and years for them to acknowledge that mercury is a health issue in our fish. And it's gone on from then. You know, Vioxx was causing 140,000 cases of serious heart disease before the FDA agreed to allow information out about what was going on with Vioxx. At the top, they were sitting on the studies showing that Vioxx was doing this. So we need to get the big money out and get the people back in so that our regulatory agencies, as well as our elected officials, are serving us, not profiteering corporations.
Okay, we have one more question,
last.
and this has to be the last one because Dr. Stein is on a tight schedule and this morning started very, very early, covered many miles, and a long message. So we want some time to spend with you before we have to give up the room. So if you please.
Thank you, Carl.
Hi, Dr. Stein.
Hi.
I traveled from New York here today.
Oh, wow. Oh, thank you so much.
My mom is a fourth grade teacher, and she's teaching on the board that she doesn't understand.
Mhm.
She has no idea how to do it. How do you propose to reform the school system?
Great. So, how do we take back our public schools, which are really under attack by a privatization campaign? So there are a couple things that we can do. Number one, we need to fully fund our schools. Again, rather than spending half of our discretionary budget destroying schools over in the Middle East and bombing hospitals and killing people, we can be putting those dollars into true security here at home. We need to fully fund education. We need small classroom size. We need to put an end to high-stakes testing and to Common Core. There are other ways to evaluate students that are actually far more valuable and meaningful. High-stakes testing has been an effort to really distract from the impediments to education. The biggest impediment to education is poverty, and we need to, put an end to poverty so that students actually come to school ready to learn. That's what the Green New Deal is about, ensuring that everyone has a living wage job. So kids are coming to school ready to learn, and then they are taught by teachers who are respected, who are well paid, whose unions are not under attack, so that they have the conditions that they need in order to teach kids well. And especially above all, that means small classroom size, and it means teaching to the whole student for lifetime learning, not to a high-stakes test. It means bringing back music, bringing back recreation, bringing back art and community engagement into our schools, and giving our students a reason to be there. This is not rocket science. Like the rest of it, we can create that world that works for all of us, an America and a world that works for all of us. The power is in our hands. We are going to be outside of the gates at the first debate at Hofstra University, doing everything we can to make it a real debate. If it's just Hillary and Donald, it is not a real debate. They don't know a thing about climate change, even Hillary, who gives it lip service but thinks that fracking is okay. If she thinks fracking's okay, she doesn't have a clue about climate change. And as long as she's taking the funding from the fossil fuel companies, she's not going to do the right thing. So we need to be up there talking about what it really takes, that we need to end all fossil fuel pipelines and new infrastructure starting right now. On the wars, we need to be there to challenge this insanity that says that more wars for oil, more wars on terror. No, we say it's time for a peace offensive in the Middle East. We need to be there to challenge them and these catastrophic policies that they just want to dig us in deeper on. And also on nuclear weapons. We need to be there to say the only solution on nuclear weapons is not to challenge Russia, not to start a war with Russia over Syria, which is what Hillary Clinton wants to do, with 2,000 nuclear warheads on hair trigger alert. We're saying it's time to dismantle those nuclear weapons and to put an end to the nuclear arms race altogether through nuclear abolition now in our time. We need to be there. We need to be in that debate. Come out and join us. In the last election, I was arrested simply for showing up at a debate that we should have been in. The American people not only have a right to vote, we have a right to know who we can vote for. We are going to Hofstra to demand that right for a full and fair, inclusive debate, not this Mickey Mouse fraud of a debate created by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is a private corporation run by the Democratic and Republican parties. We're going to go there, we're going to stand up, we're going to stand together like at Standing Rock. One people, one planet, the clock is ticking, the time to stand up is now. The future is in our hands. I'll see you at Hofstra. Come on out. See you there.